Today, we're doing some plumbing. Let's talk about that. What's going on, guys? Back with another exciting construction episode. Today, we're gonna talk about the basics of plumbing, and we're going to construct something kind of unique. It's not practical at all, but it does allow you to use all 3 or 4 of the main basic plumbing components. Here they are right here. So I'm going to be making a sprinkler kind of mock-up or sketch-up. You just saw me solder this pipe right here, but you are going to see me create a sprinkler using the main types: PEX, galvanized, PVC, and copper. Now, I know what you're thinking. Okay, you little cheater, you used a nipple that's already threaded. Galvanized is its own video that will be coming on how I actually do all that threading, that sort of thing. But for this general purpose, we are going to be laying out a copper project. The first thing I like to do is I like to dry fit my project. So it's going to be a little sprinkler system. I'm going to dry fit it right now. You ever hear those things when they say that you need to go Home Depot at least 4 times before you do a project? I forgot the PEX adapter that goes from here, this galvanized tee, off to the PEX. But it's supposed to look like this. A little ridiculous, but nonetheless should still work out pretty fine. I'll be able to get that, well, it'll be another day, it'll be tomorrow, but you'll still be able to see the whole process till the very end. So it should be pretty easy, should be pretty simple, but we can at least assemble most of these things right now. So let's do the assembly. The first thing I like to assemble is my copper. The reason why is that copper itself, you have to use heat to do, and it gets pretty hot. Obviously, you can't really touch it with your hands for a little bit of time. So we are going to solder the copper first, so we can come back and do this. Soldering copper is relatively easy, but it's a skill that many people don't necessarily have. So we're going to solder this solder connector right down here. And then once it cools down, we're gonna flip it over and we'll go over and do the rest of the stuff. I'm gonna kind of set up my GoPro and I'm gonna go through the whole process. I'll speed up some parts. I will also kind of go through some things and we'll kind of chat the whole way to go about it. So anyways, let's get through this sort of thing. So yes, I know I'm not on a pipe vise, I'm on my wood vise. Dumb, probably, but honestly, it's okay. It does warp the pipe just a little bit, but as long as you're not super tight with it, you should be a-okay. Now, I cut some of this, one of the sides of this copper pipe, so I will need to kind of figure out what needs to be deburred, if anything needs to be deburred. This is a little deburr tool, so you just take it, probably on the inside of this guy, and kind of shave off a little bit of that copper pipe. And this kind of deburs it, gets it ready for soldering. So what we're gonna do is I'm going to solder on this PEX connector and move on to the rest of this stuff. So when it comes down to soldering, there's 2 different kinds of flux you can use. There's tinning flux, I wanna say thinning, but that's not. Tinning flux and water-soluble flux. This is like the basic flux you get. If you're unsure about yourself, tinning flux is fantastic because it has a little bit of solder inside the flux. So that way you're guaranteed to get a nice, you can see here, you're guaranteed to get kind of a nice even solder. So there's a couple different ways we gotta prepare. So the first way, we deburred it. The second way, we are going to kind of scrape up the ends of this pipe so that the solder and the flux thereafter can actually fit in and have a good grip on it. That's probably not the right usage of words there, but you could also use like emery cloth. That works just as well. But you can get one of these and save you some time and money. So once this is thoroughly kind of put, we can just do a light clamp. We'll take our flux brush. We'll get a little bit of flux on there. And we just kind of brush it around. The reason why we want to use flux is that we don't want any oxidization to happen, any oxygen bubbles to pop up in our solder. And it also cleans the copper just to make sure we have the best surface possible for our solder. So once we're done with there, we put on our connector. Then the fun stuff. I'm using a propane torch. You can use matte gas, really anything. Open source heat would work just fine. And I have our solder right here. So I heat up all around, and I'm really looking for it to get kind of dark and just a different color. I can put my solder there and test a little bit. There we go. And it looks like I am pretty much golden right there. Let me get rid of this little bit of solder. That looks pretty good. So we're gonna let that cool, and then we'll continue on with the other side. Now when it comes down to galvanized, this is my personal favorite. It has probably the longest lifespan of any pipe, but it is kind of expensive to get into. And galvanized itself, while I do love it, it can be a little bit of a pain to work with and require a different set of skill that you don't need for copper. Now, some people like to use Teflon tape for galvanized pipes. That's fine. I've always been taught that plastic goes with plastic, but metal, you should have a sealant, like a thread-based sealant. So I use this True Blue pipe sealant, and that's working out pretty well. I've always liked it, and it always kind of works. What my dad and everyone used, and so far it's kind of what's worked out pretty nice. When it comes down to galvanized and these kinds of pipes, don't underestimate the power of monkey wrenches and that sort of thing. They can do a fantastic job at holding on or tightening up pipes. So I've always been a fan. Having two is super important. So once we get that through, let's take this guy, a little bit of sealant on here. You could technically use this sealant on plastic as well. However, Teflon works just basically good enough for it. Now, I do have a pipe vise. Probably be better than trying to wrestle with some of these wrenches. But when it comes down to tightening, you really can't get much better than this. We are galvanized in place. Let's get PVC. Now, PVC is kind of the most popular when it comes down to residential usage, especially with outside. PVC is known to be pretty user-friendly. In fact, it's pretty self-explanatory. You use primer, then you glue, and that's it. You really don't have to do any special soldering. You don't have to do anything like that. It's all pretty simple and easy. I'll prime both sides. So the primer, it cleans your materials to make sure that there's no dirt or grime on them, and it gives an area for the glue to kind of stick. I use this blue glue. I think it's called like Christie's Red Hot Blue Glue or something of that sort. I'm dripping everywhere. But it works just as well. And within a couple minutes, it is set up and ready to go. I'm gonna get a towel and clean this up. So PEX is kind of the new player on the block when it comes down to plumbing. And it's actually probably one of the most common ones, or not really common, but popular ones that's in a house. There's many different ways. That's the only negative part. Since PEX is so new, there's so many different ways that PEX is put on. You can do expanding or crimping, shark bites, that sort of thing. I typically just do a crimp and it works just as well. I'm gonna show you guys how to do that right now. You do need a crimping tool, which is this guy right here, and that'll actually crimp your material. And there's also a gauge to make sure you crimped right. This tool can go up to, I think, 3/4 and 1/2. So what you do is take these metal crimps. The crimping tool will kind of crimp around it. Put that on there. Put your fixture in, or whatever kind of thing you are doing. Take the crimping tool, open her up, put the crimping tool around the crimp itself, and hold it in place, and then squeeze until you hear that click. Open her up, And there you go. What the crimp did essentially was its teeth cut into that crimp and create a super tight seal. Now that is crimped forever. So that's cool, right? We could cut this and remove the crimp using a crimp removing tool, which we might do later if we want to save any of these pieces. Now, moving on, let's crimp the rest. So this goes to our hose. So let's take another crimp. I actually really like PEX. This is my first time really working with PEX extensively. I've heard about it, I have it at my home, but PEX itself is still really, really new. A lot of people are gravitating, or a lot of contractors are gravitating towards it, but PEX itself is pretty cool, and it's fairly cheap. I can't imagine doing this all day though. I understand Ryobi has a power crimper. You can actually use, and it crimps it for you. I think it's like one of the only crimpers on the market, maybe a little bit more. Let's check out this gauge. Looks like we need to crimp the other side still. Didn't get a full crimp on, which is fine. That's better. So it looks like should be good. I didn't check. So this is the gauge that you're supposed to slide on, and the crimp is supposed to slide on there and just chill at these little lines. You can't really see the lines. You could see it right there. But once the crimp sits in, that one means that it's tight and that it's acceptable. So let's continue on. I'm curious to see how to remove the crimp. I guess you have to cut this and then cut the crimp off, but I guess it's cheaper to replace the PEX than it is to just replace a crimp. So maybe that was the reasoning for it. I don't know. Okay, let's go and crimp the other side. We're gonna crimp these together. Always make sure you have your crimp on first. Okay. Nice. The crimp was kind of in a awkward spot. Probably gonna need a re-crimp. That one. So that one didn't quite pass the test. There we go. Looks like that's good. Okay. So now, since I'm going up in PEX, and the problem is there's no T to sweat, at least not that I could find. So I'm gonna have to at least crimp around. So I'm gonna have to at least crimp around and do this, and then kind of crimp to a sweat adapter. So once we get into place, and make sure we're even with everything. So if you're not right on it, you're not going to get an even crimp, and that's usually a problem. So you can see here on this one, it shifted upwards, and I did not get, I got a nice crimp, but I did not get on where I needed to. So I will need to, maybe, actually, no, I'm good. I didn't get quite on as I would like, but I actually have enough barbs in where I'm okay, and we're gonna check real quick. I need to kind of re-crimp this guy. Our copper is ready to get soldered again. I actually like soldering. It's kind of a long lost skill almost. A lot of people don't understand the importance of soldering. They don't really get it. So it's a skill that not very many people have anymore. And it's kind of cool to be a part of something like that. Now I did have some of the, I think that some of the solder kind of drip onto the pipe. That's where this kind of emery cloth comes in handy to really get a good grab. Grab some of that tinning flux. Now honestly, when you are doing this, you are going to be in someone's house doing repairs. Not very often will you be in a controlled environment like this doing these kinds of repairs. Very, very, I guess, rare that you're gonna be in, really nice environments. So it's important to invest in, good solder. It's also to make sure you get comfortable, right? You are going to be basically doing someone's livelihood or their amount of water that they have. You want to make sure that you are comfortable with what you are doing. Okay, we're not quite there. It's also important to get a fire shield, especially if you're working in someone's house. It is important to have that kind of fire shield. You don't want to light their livelihood on fire. Okay. A little bit better than the last time. Awesome. We're gonna let that cool. Now we're gonna come back here to our little frame that we got going. So we have this, that goes on the pipe. Before I forget, I'm just gonna put a crimp ring on here just to be prepared. Now I'm going to assemble these. So this is where our friend Teflon tape comes into play. A lot of people go opposite to the direction that they screw. I mean, I've always went either way. I've never went one direction more than the other. But some people really believe that, you know, if they go the direction how they're screwing, then they're going to mess up that Teflon. Yeah, I can kind of see it. I mean, I guess I've kind of done it myself. Like on this one I did. So you just tighten this up. It's also important to note when you're sweating copper, you probably don't want to throw it into water or something. Copper is pretty fragile and you can definitely mess it up by, you know, prematurely cooling it down before you are ready. Just because I'm curious and while we're letting this cool, I kind of want to see how this works. So you put the end right in here and you press down, and apparently it cuts the ring. So I guess we can go a little bit more. Maybe it only cuts on an adapter, because right now it's not cutting on this. I'll have to come back and see about that one. So let's let this cool. We'll come back and we will check it out. All right, we're back. So now we want to assemble. Place this guy right here. Let's grab our crimper. Place the crimp in. Make sure everything is golden. Okay. I ain't trying to do what everybody else doing. Just cause everybody doing what they all do. If one thing I know, awesome. I'm walking down this road of mine, this road. Perfect. Okay, now we just need to put our little sprinkler on, so we'll pop up, you know, basic sprinkler. Let's get that guy put on. Now I know what you're thinking, Garibaldi, you just put on Teflon when I'm pretty sure copper's a metal and you're using Teflon, but Teflon's only for plastic. Well, look at what we got here. But yes, Teflon is for plastic. However, when you're using metal to plastic, a little bit of Teflon won't hurt a thing, okay? All right, from this, I'm going to grab a adapter and boom, we are golden and good to go. All right, now, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys have any questions about what we're doing, just drop a comment down. You can also like, follow, I guess, subscribe, and I will catch you guys in the next exciting video. Thank you guys. We'll see you next time. One last thing. Never, ever do copper to galvanized. They have different rust points. If you do, make sure you use a brass nipple. That's my one tip. If you don't even listen to anything in this video, listen to that tip. All right, we're done now.